All right. Okay, I call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Will the city clerk please take attendance?
All council members are present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just make sure I shut my phone off. There, we are good to go. All right, action to approve the agenda. Item 3 is the approval of the agenda. I do want to take a look at it. We have one item that needs to be removed. I entertain a motion. I'll make the motion to amend the agenda, remove item number 9C, action on a malt license transfer, and item 9D, action on a new full-service restaurant on-sale liquor operating agreement from the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Will the city clerk please call the roll on the amendment?
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Okay. Entertain a motion as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any comments from the public? Seeing none, council have questions, comments on the agenda? Please call the roll.
Specker.
Aye.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye. Okay, open forum. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the council on an item not listed on tonight's agenda? Okay, we'll move on. Action on the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move. Second.
Is there any public comment on this item? Council have any questions, comments? Please call the roll. Oh, Councilmember Duren.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering if Nick would be willing to explain kind of what the duties would look like as a deputy mayor and how you've been performing them in the past years, just so the public understands the difference between the mayor and what the deputy mayor may do.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Councilor. If you didn't get a chance to look at it, the consent agenda tonight includes the approval of the deputy mayor appointment. It's a position that I've had the privilege of serving in since 2021. Oftentimes, I'm serving as a backup to the mayor if Mayor Niemeyer is not able to be in an official function or provide comments or take a particular action that the mayor would typically take. The deputy mayor is there in his stead. The same is true if a meeting needs to be led that the mayor is not available to be at, or if we both have a particular role, then as the deputy mayor, I often step in. Often when it comes to policy setting or agenda setting, I'm engaged in those conversations as well. So as we consider how to prioritize items on our agenda or when an item should go before a certain committee or a commission or on our meeting agenda, we have discussions with staff that would include myself and the mayor and key staff to make those decisions.
Any other comments, questions on the consent agenda? Please call the roll.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
So I have two proclamations this evening. And the first one we'll do is the Brookings Disability Awareness Committee to come forward and receive a proclamation. And then after that, I have been told that when I do the proclamation for the Special Olympics Day, that Junior is to come up and receive it. Is Junior here? All right, excellent. Okay. Mayoral proclamation. Whereas Global Accessibility Awareness Day is commemorating its 13th anniversary of educating about digital access and inclusion for the more than 1 billion people with disabilities. And whereas GAAD as led by the GAAD Foundation, which was founded on the 10th anniversary of Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and whose mission is to disrupt the culture of technology and digital product development to include accessibility as a core requirement. And whereas workplaces welcoming of the talents of all people, including disabled people, are a critical part of our efforts to build an inclusive community and strong economy. Yet more than 98.1% of corporate and organizations' homepages have at least one web context accessibility guidelines 2.0 failure, thus making it difficult for those members of the disabled community from fully accessing information. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Opie Garrett Niemeyer, Mayor of the City of Brookings, do hereby proclaim May 2025 as Global Accessibility Awareness Month, and I call on all employers, schools, and other community organizations in Brookings to observe this month with an appropriate review of their digital content and address issues identified in such reviews that prevent disabled people from accessing or using digital content provided by these institutions. All right. Mark, you want to say a few words?
I always call computers the great equalizers or ability enhancers. Whatever you can do, they can make it better. You have trouble with math, every time you do 2 + 2, you get 5. Computers are great at that. All they do is math all the time. Ain't got no good English? Computers can help you with that. If you're like me and thought about getting a t-shirt that said, "Bed spellers of the world untie," computers can help you out with that. But they can also be the greatest barrier that you could ever think of, stopping people from getting access to resources and things they need, or just entertainment. And many of the things that we do to make their websites, etc., more accessible are good for everybody. Think about it. Some of the things are those flashing bells and whistles that going off and on. And those are really a way to get you to maybe stop paying attention and buy something or do something you maybe wouldn't. So helping with the disabled, those are the kind of things that might cause somebody to have, an issue or something, a seizure maybe even. But they also are things that distract us all, and we're probably better off without them. Now, the website companies might argue with that because that's part of their trade, is getting you to buy stuff you maybe didn't want to buy. But anything we can do to make the world better for the disabled will probably make the world better for everyone. So, thank you.
You're good? All right. All right. So, Junior needs to come up here. How you doing? Good. All right. Mayoral proclamation, whereas the Special Olympics South Dakota provides individuals with intellectual disabilities and the opportunity to engage in sports, promote physical fitness, and foster a sense of community and inclusion. And whereas the athletes representing Brookings in the Special Olympics South Dakota State Competition have demonstrated exceptional dedication, determination, and sportsmanship in preparation for this event. And whereas these athletes, their families, and coaches have strong and credible commitment to fostering an environment of growth, encouragement, and mutual respect both on and off the field. And whereas the City of Brookings is proud to support these athletes and recognize their achievements as they work towards achieving their personal best and representing our community with pride. And whereas we extend our heartfelt best wishes to all the athletes competing at the Special Olympics South Dakota State Competition in Vermillion, as they strive for excellence and demonstrate the power of inclusion and perseverance. Now therefore it be resolved that I, Opie Garrett Niemeyer, Mayor of the City of Brookings, do hereby proclaim May 27, 2025 as Special Olympics Day. So, Junior, what's your competition going to be?
The 50-meter run and the javelin throw.
Are you pretty good at it?
Yeah.
Excellent.
My name is Brian Chatham. I'm a chair of the Special Olympics Board here in Brookings. I've been involved with Brookings Special Olympics for 4 years. This is a great group of kids. We got a lot of support from the parents and the community. We appreciate any other support we can gather. We have a real strong showing here. And also, we're fortunate that we have 3 of our athletes that are representing the state of South Dakota in the national games next year in Minneapolis. And we have 2 that are in softball and then 1 in powerlifting. So we have our state games this weekend, and should be a real good competition and a long weekend, but a very fun weekend. Thank you.
Congratulations. Okay, so we'll have a 2025 year-to-date financial report from Ashley Wrench, our finance director.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. This is the 2025 year-to-date finance report. In this presentation, I'll go over our year-to-date sales tax revenue, budget versus actuals, notable capital projects, our final ARPA funding update, and the City Council financial policy projects, as well as an economic update and some financial awards and achievements. As you can see on the first and second penny graph, in January, we came in below last year and the prorated budget. This is due to a large audit refund to Solventum for an overpayment in 2024. And from February through April, we've slowly but steadily recovered, exceeding last year and the prorated budget, and we're currently at 2.2% above last year and 1.5% above the prorated budget. 3B tax has remained strong throughout the first 4 months of the year, consistently coming in over budget and the prior year, with Eating Places performing well and the best out of our 3 hospitality categories that we monitor, which also includes drinking places and hotels, which have both decreased slightly compared to the same time last year. Bid tax is currently at 9.4% below last year and the budget due to a decrease in January and April events that resulted in less hotel stays. If you'll remember last year, there was an indoor track meet and a state high school basketball and hockey tournaments that were not hosted in Brookings this year. And there was also a meeting that was canceled due to federal funding cuts and a decrease in bus tourism from Canada that typically included overnight stays in Brookings. This slide shows the sales tax by category. As you can see, the manufacturing category, where we experienced that large refund in January, has recovered and even increased over last year. The services category has also increased substantially over last year. In wholesale trade, towards the end of last year, some taxpayers were recategorized to construction and manufacturing, which accounts for much of that year-over-year decrease in wholesale trade, and then the resulting increase in the other 2 categories. Retail trade, our largest category, is currently slightly below last year, mainly due to a decrease in January that is slowly showing signs of recovery as the year progresses, and we'll continue monitoring this category closely throughout the rest of the year. On this slide, you can see that our general fund is made up of a relatively even split of general government, culture and recreation, public works, and public safety, with health and welfare being an extension of public safety, with our community service unit responsible for animal control and code enforcement. Personnel makes up 62% of the general fund budget, while operating expenses make up the remaining 38%. As of the end of April, overall expenditures for the general fund are on track at 28% of budget, and revenues are at 23%. Just 2 departments are running a little ahead of budget at this time, including the general government buildings and forestry, and this is due to annual insurance payments that are a significant portion of their budgets. For revenues, we typically see a slower start to the beginning of the year as we receive that first half of property tax in May, which will put us on track. Other funds are also, our other funds are also where we would expect them to be at this point of the year. The CIP fund is currently at 13% of the budget, with most projects and purchases happening in the second and third quarters. Other special revenue funds are at 25% overall, and our enterprise funds are at 21% overall. Liquor, solid waste, and the Research and Technology Center are closer to their targets at 1/3 through the year, as their revenues and expenses are more consistent throughout the entire year. The timing of airport projects and grant funding play a large role in that enterprise fund budget, with the taxiway construction and taxi lane design and construction planned for this year. Finally, our Edgebrook Golf Course, seasonality plays a large role in that budget for that enterprise fund. As I said before, much of our capital project activity happens in the second and third quarters of the year. Notable capital projects so far this year for the first 4 months include Amoresco Energy Efficiency Project, which is a $3.3 million project that began last year and includes several projects such as LED lighting and windows, doors, and roofing across several city facilities. At this time, the project is 84% complete with $2.8 million spent to date. Other projects and purchases so far this year have included epoxy flooring at the Dakota Bank Center for $80,000, $107,000 in police vehicles, $73,000 for a Bobcat at the Street Division, and the Parks shop roof at $63,000. As of December 31st, all $2.2 million allocated to our community partners for mental health, childcare, workforce housing, and affordable housing has been expended. This slide shows our City Council Financial Policy Projects Fund, which is primarily made up of unassigned general fund reserves. The current balance is just over $19.7 million, and at this time, the primary project is the public safety facility, currently estimated at $17 million, leaving about $2.7 million left for the secondary projects, which include the fire station at $4 million, activity center remodel estimated at $5 million, and a library remodel estimated at $10 million for a total of $19 million in secondary projects. In terms of our economic outlook going into the rest of 2025, we can be optimistic about a steady development with the Solventum expansion, the marketplace, and our downtown incentives. There is also a projected gradual decrease in mortgage rates that could stimulate the real estate market. We've also seen the Midwest and National Consumer Price Index trending closer together, with Midwest being slightly ahead of national for the past 6 months or so, after historically being lower than the national average. Overall, for the United States, there's a lot of mixed signals currently with tariffs and trade issues, but on the bright side, inflation has continued to trend closer to that 2% goal, and many economists are now reducing their probability of a recession this year. Finally, I'd like to recognize the efforts of our finance team and budget team, as well as all of our department heads and managers for their contributions in making it possible for the city to earn the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for our 2023 Annual Comprehensive Report and the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for our 2025 Online Interactive Budget Book. Both of these awards are presented by the Government Finance Officers Association. This concludes the year-to-date finance report, and I'll stand by for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Is there any questions or comments from council? Councilmember Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. Ashley, I have a question related to slide 3 and the tax revenues.
Sure.
I know there's some volatility, or has been some volatility in the 3B and in the bid tax revenues, but so far we seem to be performing fairly well in sales tax. I've heard lots about the state being concerned about overall sales tax revenue in 2025 being down. Do you have a sense of how we might compare to other, say, most populated municipalities in the state right now in terms of our sales tax performance?
Sure. Yep, we track our top 10 cities, our top 10 most comparable cities every month, and we're right in line with everyone else, performing actually just a little bit better.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Specker.
Thank you, Ashley, for doing a nice presentation. On the same slide, if you look at actual gross amounts, are we ahead of, or are we behind
In terms of budget or?
in terms of all of these different tax revenues? Are we where we want to be at this time of year, or are we below it? Because like, it's hard to tell what % of the total tax revenue is BID or the sales tax or 3B?
Sure. Yep. I would say we're right where we would want to be right now. We are 1.5% above our budget, so that's where we'd hope to be.
And I have one more question. Have we heard anything on the airport grant? Are we still getting that?
I'm not exactly sure on that. Yes, we are.
Good. I'll be asking that monthly. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Ashley. Okay, we'll move on to item 7, contracts and change orders. Item 7A, action on resolution 25-050, a resolution to award the contract for playground replacements at Indian Hills, Sarah Renee, and Hillcrest Parks. Kristen Zimmerman, our Park Rec and Forestry Director, will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Good evening. The item before you is to replace the Indian Hills Playground, replace the swing set at Hillcrest, and replace the playground at Sarah Renee. We went out to bid for all 3 of those projects, and they came in at budget at $450,000. Some of the fun features, so the playground at Sarah Renee will have a wider swing or wider slide. The swing sets at Hillcrest will have what they call a hammock style swing that you can see in your picture. So you can pile lots of kids on there for a fun picture. But it's also great for people that may have low muscle tone so they can lay right across the swing. There's communication boards at each swing, so people that may be nonverbal can point to if they're hot or overheated or really excited and having fun, which we hope they are. They'll be there too. So these are set to be built yet this summer and open this fall. So we're pretty excited. There's pictures in your backup. We did have a combination of kids look at the playgrounds because, they're the ones that are going to be playing on, and why not include them in the process? Our staff for maintenance purposes. Brookings Police Department helped us out too because they see it from a different perspective as well. And so the ones before you are the top choices all around.
Thanks, Kristen. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this particular item? Council have any questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 7B, action on resolution 25-051, a resolution to award the contract to upgrade restrooms at the Dakota Bank Center. And Kristen is not going to, well, who is, I don't know you, I'm sorry.
I'm Cody Poland with the Dakota Bank Center.
All right. And you'll present the item. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I want to say thank you to Kristen for helping us get to this point and helping Ashley and I navigate the process. But the item we have is a renovation for 8 restrooms at the Dakota Bank Center. We went to RFP March 17th. That closed on April 11th. We had 3 proposals. And we have them ranked on there as well. And this is hoping to get some action to complete the work on these restrooms.
All right. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item? Council, any questions, comments? So when we're saying bathroom renovations, are we talking the floors, the fixtures, the mirrors, everything?
Yes, yep, everything
paint?
in there will be completely redone.
All right.
No structural work, though.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
All right. Item 8, first readings. Item 8A, introduction and first reading on ordinance 25-016, an ordinance authorizing budget amendment number 2 to the 2025 budget. Paul Brusino, as city manager, will present this item.
On the heels of the merger discussion last week, or last city council meeting, this budget amendment allows the city council to expend the $250,000 necessary for the merger, as well as additional funds necessary for additional rental costs for both the Visit Brookings as well as the chamber. This is the first reading. The second reading will be held at the next meeting. Staff will be happy to answer any questions council might have.
All right. Is there any public comment on this item? Council have any questions, comments? Councilmember Duren.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a comment that I think this shows that City Council does understand the large undertaking that all these organizations who affirm their participation in the economic merger will be taking. This item allows for the city to continue to provide tangible support for these organizations throughout this endeavor. I did have 2 quick questions to be confirmed. Would you just remind the public of when the CEO search process should be complete? And then, since this also discusses the rental support of that the search for a sustainable location for the merged organization would be taking place after the conclusion of the CEO hiring, correct? Whoever would like to answer that.
Councilmember Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councilor Dorn. The first question about the search process and timeline for the new CEO of the merged organization. We're in the midst of sort of the scaling up process now, which this gives me a good opportunity to note that we're also in the midst of selecting the board of directors that will ultimately serve as the search committee for the new president and CEO. Applications for that board of directors are due this Friday. And so folks that are interested, you could certainly let us know if you've not gotten access to an application just yet. The goal is by June 16th, that board of directors will be appointed and they'll begin the search process for the president and CEO, sort of as their first official duty. The goal is for that search process to take the better part of the summer, and that there'll be a public-facing part of that search process when final candidates are in the community, and likely by the end of August, early fall, that new president and CEO will be in place, and we'd like for them to be on the ground in Brookings and start their work in early September so that they can get familiar with the team at the existing organizations and the community if they don't happen to be from Brookings. The goal is for the new organization to launch in January of 2026. But we're hoping that the new president and CEO will be able to join us before that. I think the second part of the question was related to when that lease agreement might take effect and need additional resources. Sure. Part of why there are some additional dollars necessary, both for the Chamber of Commerce and Visit Brookings, is because their current location, they're in a 5-year lease, and that lease agreement actually expires September 1st, but they have to give notice to their landlord, I think, by June 1st, whether or not they intend to renew. Those organizations are still exploring the merger, and collectively, the board and those organizations will determine where they will be located and if that location could accommodate all 4 organizations. Because those decisions are all still question marks, they can't really commit to another 5-year lease. But in negotiations with their landlord, they've been told that if they do a short-term, say 6-month or 1-year lease extension, it will increase their monthly rate substantially. And so these dollars are sort of a good faith effort to say, if you have to agree to, say, a short-term lease extension until decisions are made about a future location, and you'll incur substantial additional costs because of that, we're willing to support you through an amendment to your existing budget. We don't want their current activities in the remainder of 2025 to suffer because they're worried about paying for a more expensive lease in the beginning of 2026 if they're not ready to move yet or the merged organization doesn't have a permanent home yet. So that's kind of the timeline and why, in particular, at the beginning of 2026, additional resources may be necessary.
All right. Any other comments, questions from council? Along with all the other first readings we have this evening, there will be a second reading on this item on June 10th. Okay, item 8B, introduction and first reading on ordinance 25-017, an ordinance authorizing budget amendment number 3 to the 2025 budget. John Thompson, our Public Works Director, will present this item.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. John Thompson with Public Works. Item 8B is the first reading of budget amendment number 3 to the 2025 adopted budget. Staff is recommending this amendment as it will allocate funding to make public improvements along Capitol Street which will support ongoing economic development efforts. This amendment will transfer $200,000 from the General Fund Economic Development Reserves to the Marketplace Capital Project Fund for a sewer line extension and transfer $260,000 from the Second Penny Tax Capital Improvements Reserve for paving and street improvements along Capitol Street. The $260,000 from the Second Penny Capital Improvement Fund will be reimbursed upon future sale of the city-owned Weiss property directly north of the site. I think I've got a, yeah, so you can see on the screen, I know we got to almost turn around here, but the little yellow section to the left going east, that would be the sewer line extension over, and the Weiss property is just to the north of that. And then the $260,000 is to pave Capitol Street from 32nd over to the new Lefevre Drive. If approved tonight, staff will come back on June 10th for the second reading. Staff stands for any questions.
Thank you, John. Is there any public input or questions on this item? Council members have any questions, comments? Thank you, John. Introduction and first reading on ordinance 25-018, an ordinance to change the zoning of the city of Brookings, Lot 1 in Clark Addition, Lot 2 in Clark Second Addition, from an agricultural aid district to a business 3 heavy district. Mike Struck, our community development director, will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Ordinance 25-018 is a ordinance to rezone property from an ag district to a business B3 district. This is located on the east edge of Brookings, just on the east side of 34th Avenue. The applicants are proposing the B3. They felt there's a need for that in the community where the B3 is a little bit more of a heavy business district. And in this area, they're looking at B3 and I1 zoning for a long-term perspective. This does come to you with a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission. The staff does support the request, and it's consistent with your City Council strategic plan of economic growth. With that, I would stand for any questions you may have.
All right, thanks, Mike. Does public have any input on or questions on this item? Council, have any questions, comments? Mike, this is the property that we just annexed, correct?
That is correct.
All right, just so we get an idea of where we're at on this. All right, and then we'll move on to item 8D, since you're standing there, Mike. Introduction and first reading in ordinance 25-019, an ordinance pertaining to an application for a conditional use permit to establish a major home occupation gunsmithing business in a Residence R2 two-family district. 2505 Larkspur Ridge Drive is the address. And Mike will present this item also.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Ordinance 25-019 is ordinance for conditional use for a major home occupation in a residential district. The applicant resides at 2505 Larkspur Ridge Drive. The request is to, according to our major home occupation, it would be for a gunsmithing business at the residence. Currently has a business where he assists in the assembly of firearms, and so he's leasing a location at the out at the research park. Really felt that the market maybe isn't as abundant in Brookings any longer, and so it was going to transfer the license to this resident and have it licensed through the ATF. With that process, they're required to go through all the local approvals prior to applying for those federal licenses, and so it does fall as a conditional use. Staff does support the request. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to support the request, but there are 3 conditions that are being recommended with that. One, that the conditional use is valid for the applicant only and not transferable. The build classes that they do cannot be held on site, and that the applicant must submit the proof of all relevant licensing every 3 years to the Community Development Department. With that, I would stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mike. Is there any public comments on this item? Council, any questions, comments? Councilmember Avery, we'll go with you first. Sorry.
Mike, when I first saw that, I saw, gunsmithing, and my vision of gunsmithing was the firing pin on my shotgun is broke, so I'll take it to the gunsmith to get it fixed. But we're talking about something different here, where we're talking about actual buying component parts for an AR-15 rifle and assembling them. Is that what I understand?
So as part of the business, yes, they have product parts shipped occasionally to the house, and then he teaches a build class. So other individuals that are interested in assembling their own firearms, they attend these classes, and they teach them how to properly assemble the firearms and then to maintain them.
Mm-hmm. Do you know how they're shipped? Is it UPS or?
I'm not sure how they're shipped. I would imagine some package carrier, and they have to be signed for.
Mm-hmm. I think when I read the different things about it, there was checking with the school district because there is near a school zone, checking with the police department, all the different. I think everybody kind of hit you a little bit different. Is this a good idea? And I think everybody went at it as, is this legal from us? Does it violate any state or federal laws? And I think it was determined that it didn't. But I think when we look at it, we're probably going to look at it a little differently. And does it make sense to have that in, a firearms manufacturing type of business in a residential district like that? So, just I think there's some concerns there.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Hager.
So I realize in our memo, it stated, and like Wayne just mentioned, that state and federal laws are being followed. And I know that the applicant is saying that the business for these classes has somewhat dried up in Brookings. But my question is, in the event that there is an opportunity to have a class in Brookings, does the applicant have ideas of where those classes could be held? And then also, how many people constitute a class?
So in the previous discussions with the applicant, they can be held in meeting rooms, whatever meeting space would be available in the community. Typically, he indicated, build classes might be 4 or 5 participants, maybe a few more. Just kind of depends on how many are interested and can they participate in that particular day. But if a specific site doesn't prohibit, they could meet at pretty much any location that would be available.
Okay. Because I know it doesn't really seem as if there's a lot of enforcement mechanisms in place to ensure that the different conditions are met. So I guess that also kind of goes along with my question of, are there any sort of real enforcement mechanisms that are here? When the build class could be just a few people, not to say that the applicant would violate that or anything, but just to ensure that there's a way to really kind of keep tabs on these sorts of permits that we're possibly giving.
So if the city became aware that they were in violation, we could pull their conditional use permit and they wouldn't be able to operate, and then in which case they would lose their federal license.
Is there really a great way for us to know if that's being violated?
If we were to observe it, if some of the neighbors contacted us, if the police were responded, but it'd be like any other conditional use. There's not great mechanisms to really administer conditional uses, because the only way to truly is if you're on site at the time that their violation is occurring.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, because I think like one of the things is for me too, like what's the definition of a class versus maybe the potential for just a couple of friends who are interested in building a firearm of some kind coming over. It just seems like there's a little bit of potential for gray area there. So, but thank you for answering my questions.
All right, Councilmember Specker.
I wouldn't have a problem with this in a residential area if it wasn't abutting a school property, because to me that is where my concern is, and that's that. So,
Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mayor. I have several questions. So one, just to clarify, since this property is not owned by the applicant, would it technically be a lease, or how would that mechanism work for this permit?
So the property is owned by the applicant's mother.
Okay,
It's a family relation.
okay. So that, okay, that answers that question. And then if you would know, since the materials are being ordered to this property, I'm assuming, so if you could confirm for me, that the kits go through like the adequate like background checks, or serial numbers are on them, like they are like the legal guns that you could build, and there wouldn't be, I guess, any concern for like ghost guns, like that problem that exists in the nation?
I'm not capable of answering that because I don't participate in that business. We did
Mike,
reach out.
is the applicant present? Come on up, please. Mike's kind of struggling here, and maybe we can get direct answers. I'm sorry, Mike.
Good evening. My name is Tyler Brockle. I'm the owner of Havoc Engineering Group. To answer your question first, if you don't mind. So, basically, what I'm doing is, in order to move my license from the research park to this property, what this license allows me to do is actually put my own serial numbers, Havoc Engineering Group, manufactured in Brookings, South Dakota, on there. Nothing is actually built on the premises. Everything is made by third-party machine shops within the United States. Everything follows ATF law, and so like when one of these, I don't like to use the word build kit, but when these classes are purchased, we are going through all ATF background checks, FBI background checks. We're following all ATF regulations. Everything is serial numbered. There are no ghost guns. There are no 80% lowers. If you have an FFL, you want to stay away from that stuff. And so I stick to everything is done by law. No, we will not do build classes on premises. What we have to do is we have to partner with other FFLs. So particularly, we're looking at First Amendment designs in Aurora, where we can host these classes. And so the sale of a build kit or a firearm or a lower receiver has to be sold on the premises where a license is held. So I would partner with these other license holders, transfer the firearms to them, build classes will happen on their premises, and that's what allows me to actually go around and do these build courses. We will not be doing them in just random places that we rent.
So theoretically, you're using your premises for a distribution point, more or less?
More or less.
You're receiving and sending from your address, more or less?
Essentially, but more importantly, it allows me to actually, the license has to be held somewhere so
Right.
that I can put those serial numbers on my firearms.
Okay.
And as far as like parts sitting outside my door, anything serialized, so like the lower receivers, that has to be signed for. Everything else is completely inert, and regardless of whether I have this, I'm a big gun guy. There will be gun parts being delivered to my house regardless. So, and there hasn't been an issue in the last 3 years that I've been there.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Tilton Burn, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I understand that the home is owned by your mother. Do you reside at this location?
I do.
At any point, will the guns be fully assembled for business purposes in the home?
I predominantly do not do that. The only time I have done that is for charity. So built one for Pheasants Forever, built one for the raffles at Beacon Hill Rifle Pistol Club. Predominantly, it has been the build classes, and then in addition to that, I also do new product development consulting for other defense industry companies, and so sometimes they will send me particular products as well to evaluate and test. And so there's a lot of different things going on with it that this will allow me to do.
So it sounds like there is maybe a possibility that a firearm would be assembled for business purposes on the premise?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll just be transparent and say that I also have a lot of hesitation about a use such as this at a property that abuts a school. And so I do have some hesitation around this.
And even if it is, I would say this, like me, the neighbors, everyone around there, we all have our own personal weapons as well. So, I mean, it's not blocking anything in that sense. There are still a lot of hunters, shooters, and ammunition, firearms on the premises legally, obviously.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Councilman Member Dern.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question actually for Chief Drake, if he wouldn't mind, referencing the question about enforcement. So when I was doing a little bit of research, it looked like other towns have implemented compliance checks similar to like checking for liquor licenses. So I was just wondering if that exists here for any business in our community that operates with weapons of any kind.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So we work very closely with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. They're the ones that do the checks on all their records. So they'll do random inspections, they'll do periodic. He has to keep records and logs of doing that stuff. We normally would not do that at our level unless we were requested by them. But I can tell you that, and most of the time the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms will ask us once in a while to accompany them to go there or to at least go and randomly inspect his records. And with that being, we would have the federal enforcement to do that. So as far as the local ordinances at state or federal level, we follow what the BATFE says, and they do all those, and their restrictions for these types of whether it's munitions. He didn't mention about live ammunition, which I think he should probably address. It might help clarify some of it. And the builds. The different licenses he has to go through and the process that he has is very, very regimented, and in the record keeping of what he has to in all the serialized property. With that being said, we could do something at our level to help, augment that, but being, having been involved in these, they do a very good job of keeping them. Anybody that has an FFL or does gunsmithing, they have to go through the different licensing procedures, keep their records, report them, and be open to inspection at any time.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chief. Any other questions? Councilmember Specker.
Yes, could he please address the ammunition part of this?
That makes sense. Yeah. So just if you want to address ammunition.
I know on that type 7, you can't have explosives.
Correct.
But you can
Yeah,
have
I'm not,
ammunition.
I'm sorry. I have my own personal ammunition, right? Like,
Right.
I hunt, I pheasant hunt. I also do a lot of 3-gun at Beacon Hill. I have my own personal ammunition. That's what I alluded to. I am not building ammunition. There's nothing done with ammunition in any of the build classes. I'm just saying I own my own personal.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for the clarification. Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Hager.
So just to get back to my question, now that you actually are at the podium.
Sure.
So, so based on what you were explaining earlier and then what Chief Drake was saying, it sounds like there's a lot of record keeping taking place in terms of who wants you to actually walk them through this build, you actually getting the parts. So that somewhat alleviates my concern, it sounds like, in terms of you're not just going to potentially have a few friends show up randomly and say, hey, help me, walk through this gun building process.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've had this license for 3 years. All I'm doing is just relocating it. So, and all my records have to be kept for 20 years. And yeah, I follow, I follow everything to the letter of the law. I got a lot of records, and we do everything is a background check, or the proper.
For sure. Yeah, no, my questions are just to better understand what would be taking place or other possible things that might arise, not that there's necessarily somebody who's going to be violating any of these conditions, but just to better understand.
And you guys are also the first gate that I have to get through, right? So after this, the next step is to actually apply for the change with the ATF, and so they'll have a check system as well.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. All right, we'll have second reading on June 10th.
All right. Thank you all.
Item 8E, introduction and first reading on ordinance 25-020, an ordinance pertaining to an application for a conditional use permit to establish a major home occupation, hair salon, in a residence R1A, single-family district, 1214 Western Avenue.
Thank you,
Mike
Mayor.
Struck will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Ordinance 25-020 is a ordinance for a conditional use for a major home occupation for a single-chair hair salon at 1214 Western Avenue. This is pretty self-explanatory. The applicant is just wanting to conduct an in-home hair salon, a single chair. The one condition that is being recommended by both staff and the Planning Commission is that the conditional use is valid for the applicant only. They meet all the parking requirements for this particular use. With that, it does come as a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission, and staff supports it. And I'd stand for any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mike. Any public comment on this item? Council have any questions, comments? All right. Move on to item 9, second readings and public hearings. Item 9A, public hearing and action on a request for an on-off sale malt license with video lottery authorization for PNP Pub Suite B to be located at 318 2nd Street South in the Suite B. Bonnie Foster, our city clerk, will present this item.
Mayor and council members, both this item and the one following pertain to the 318 2nd Street South. The action before you is for a new on-off sale malt license for this location. The applicant, John Schoen, owner, is requesting to add on a Suite B for a second video lottery suite at this location. You'll see on the map, one more slide. On the map where this is going to be added is going to be in the southwest corner, directly south of the existing casino or pub. And then they will be adding a spacer in between, which is a C-store addition. Requirements have been met. This location and its layout does adhere to state law requirements. Staff recommends approval. Representatives are present this evening if the council has any questions.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Open the public hearing on this item. Is there any public comment? Council have any questions, comments on this item? Councilmember Specker.
Yeah, I have a question in that the new addition, according to this layout, includes 6 machines, but it's the actual licenses for 10.
Correct, Councilmember Specker. With the video lottery authorization, the establishment can have up to 10 machines for the location. So they get licensed for 10 machines, even if the space only allows for 6. Then when the renewals come around, they will only pay the renewal for 6 machines.
Okay. And I have another question that this might be more for Mike. Because it looks like you have a new building, like you're doing major renovations on this building in order from the, and maybe you're not, but according to the drawings that were included with this packet. And this seems to lie in the corridor, commercial corridor. I mean, this is Main Street on the left of that. So
I would need to check with staff. This is the first I was aware of that. If they're doing an expansion, we'll have to verify all the setbacks and go from there and see.
I guess that's part of it is you do provide, I guess you're the applicant.
Just on behalf of the applicant, yeah.
Okay. You provide like architectural drawings of what looks like major renovations on this building. And it also seems to me that it's in the corridor, so.
I mean, I'm a little bit familiar with this particular location. You wouldn't be able to see the addition anywhere from Main Avenue. It's blocked by the existing building. It would be to the south, if it's my understanding. But I'm suspecting that there's going to be setback issues and variances are probably going to be needed just from what little I've seen.
Okay.
So there's probably a few things that have to be worked through yet.
Okay. Thank you.
So with that being said, Bonnie, would that be a deterrent to approve this? We can still approve it, it's just that they have to make sure whether or not it fits within their property, correct?
That is correct. The council still could approve this. If they so desire, the applicant would still need to meet those requirements through the building permit process in the Community Development Office.
All right. Vince, you concur with that? All right. Any other comments from council? Councilmember Tilton Burn.
Bonnie, can you confirm, would this be our final permit at this time for video lottery?
Correct. This would be the last authorization that we have available.
Great, thank you.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Please call the roll.
Doran?
Aye.
Hager?
Aye.
Niemeyer?
Aye.
Specker?
Aye.
Tiltonburn?
Aye.
Wendell?
Aye.
Avery?
Aye.
All right. To be along with this last item, item 9B, public hearing and action on a request for a video lottery authorization for PNP Pub to be located at 318 2nd Street South, Suite B. Bonnie will also present this.
Mayor and council members, with the approval of the on-off sale malt license you just done, this is a request for the video lottery authorization which the applicant is seeking to obtain. This will allow for up to 10 video lottery machines in this Suite B. And if they only decide to put in 6 machines, then that is what they would pay renewal fees for at the annual renewal time. The suite does meet state law requirements for access points. Final authorization of the video lottery would be through the state video lottery and Department of Revenue offices. Representatives are present if the council has any questions.
All right. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and second. Open public hearing on this. Is there any public comment on this item? Council, any questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Niemeyer?
Aye.
Specker?
Aye.
Tiltonburn?
Aye.
Wendell?
Aye.
Avery?
Aye.
Doran?
Aye.
Hager?
Aye.
All right, so items 9C and 9D were removed, and so we move on to item 9E, public hearing and action on ordinance 25-008, an ordinance amending Chapter 94, Article 4, Division 2 pertaining to Section 94-165, Commercial Corridor Design Review Overlay District. Mike Struck will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. The ordinance 25-008 is an amendment to our current Commercial Corridor Design Review Overlay District regulations. In a quick and overall summary, what the emphasis or basis for the change is, it provides for the administrative approval of a project that meets all of the requirements of the Commercial Corridor Design Review Overlay District. Our current process requires Planning Commission and City Council approval, whether you're asking for an exception or not. This would basically allow that if they meet all the requirements of the ordinance, it can be approved administratively by staff. If they're asking for any exceptions from the ordinance, it would follow the same process that would go to Planning Commission with a recommendation coming forward to the City Council. In addition, it cleans up some of the language that it has created, some of the gray areas, and have taken some of the subjectivity out of the ordinance. It also addressed how we handle planned development districts. Currently, they are exempt from the Commercial Corridor Overlay District requirements. This proposed change would require them to follow the Commercial Corridor process if they're located along one of our 4 major corridors. In addition, there was also a small gap on Main Avenue that was not covered under the Commercial Corridor and did not fall within a historic district, so that would be addressed with these proposed changes. With that, it does come to you with a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission. Staff does support the request, and I'd stand for any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mike. Entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Been moved and second, and I'm opening public hearing on this item. Is there public comment on this item? You state your name and address, sir.
Yes, I am Kyle Roush with Dakota Land Design. I'd just like to give one example of a challenge that I've had with this current review process. This last October, I met with a potential client from Sioux Falls. The client owns several medical buildings throughout Sioux Falls and some surrounding areas, and they're looking to expand to Brookings. They needed to start a project before the end of the year. Our company had a design. We just needed to get an estimate and pricing proposal together for those people. We expedited the proposal, corridor packet, city council review, building permits, and we told them if we did all that, we'd hope for a March 1st groundbreaking. The client thought the process was ridiculous. They had built before in Sioux Falls. They couldn't believe that it was more difficult to build in Brookings than in Sioux Falls, and they ended up forgetting the Brookings project and built in a very nearby town. And that's how that ended up. Most projects that we build in the corridor require preliminary design, estimating, proposals, corridor submissions, DRT review, planning commission review, city council review. Then we put the final drawings together, the appraisals, and we get the permits. That's about a 10-month process, I would figure, on average. And we have an 8-month construction season, so it is a lot. At this time, I'm asking for approval of this, administrative approval of the corridor submissions if they meet all requirements. However, any positive changes that we can make to expedite this process would be a welcome change. I like public comment, and I'm not opposed to that, but we need to cut this time down by half because this is really, it's hurting growth in Brookings. I'm a supporter of the Corridor Overlay District. I think we built some beautiful things in town since it started. And I appreciate all the time that the council takes to ensure Brookings is moving in that great direction. And I just ask that you guys to continue to ensure that we're an inviting place to bring new businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item?
Good evening. My name is Sandra Calise, and I'll just say something really quick. I support everything that Kyle says as an architect. It is wonderful to build in Brookings and in South Dakota, and we're going to talk about this later today, but except for in a historic district, so thank you.
All right. Any other public comments? Council have any questions, comments? Councilmember Tilton Burn.
Mike, I'm curious to know if there are possible scenarios out there where administrative approval would be denied. Obviously, if they didn't meet all of the requirements, I assume that would be denied and go through a process where it would then come to council or at least seek amendments to that. But are there any other circumstances where maybe all of the requirements would be met that administrative approval would be denied?
I can't see a reason. I mean, if they meet the regulations, we don't have the grounds to deny them on a permit or approval process. So I mean, as long as they're meeting the regulations, we wouldn't be able to deny them. I mean, we don't have the ability to subjectively pick and choose which projects get approved. As long as they meet our requirements, we have to approve them.
Okay. And then just as a reminder, I know we've covered this pretty extensively in previous meetings, but this would be a change that would essentially make administrative just the design. All other things would still go through the regular process. There would still be public hearing and input opportunities. This would just be for those design elements that would pertain to the commercial corridor, correct?
Assuming all of the zoning is in place, I mean, if the zoning is correct, there would be no approval process needed. But if there's a change of zone, that would go through its normal process, Planning Commission, City Council. If it's a conditional use, same process. But if it's a project or a property that is zoned appropriately along the corridor, there would be no approval process other than to submit their project proposal to staff to verify that it meets all the commercial corridors, and then it can go straight to building permit.
And outside of the commercial corridor, when a project meets zoning requirements, what does that process look like?
So if they're not in a commercial corridor, they submit, as long as it meets zoning and building permit, the permit's issued. Turnaround time, depending on the complexity of the project, can vary anywhere from a week to 3 weeks for the review and approval process. Yeah, it's a pretty quick turnaround if they're not in a corridor.
And that's administrative in nature.
Yes, if it's in the corridor, it's automatic 2 months.
Great, thank you.
So Mike, if we approve this pretty much takes 2 months off of the process, correct?
Potentially, I mean, they still have to submit, there's still the review process
Right.
internally, but yes.
But it takes us out of the loop and also Planning Commission, correct?
Correct,
Which is basically about 8 weeks.
correct.
All right. Councilmember Tilton Burn.
And maybe just to follow up on my line of questioning, what I think what I was trying to get at is by making this an administrative process, it puts an equal playing field for developers that are in the commercial corridor as those that are not in the commercial corridor when it comes to a permitting process.
Correct.
Thank you.
Although the standards are more strict in the corridor, but they're on a level playing field from the time frame for approvals.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Councilmember Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a comment, and this is perhaps for the benefit of folks that maybe haven't followed this discussion over the last year. An almost identical item was on our agenda close to a year ago, and we received some public feedback about it with some concerns about whether or not this was removing adequate public interaction or opportunities for public comment. And I think the council took that to heart, and we had a good discussion that night in our meeting, and we'd gotten a lot of email feedback and phone calls from folks that had questions about that. After that, we then held a study session where we dug deeper, and staff were really able to, I think, unpack for us what this process would look like if they were requesting an exception, if a conditional use permit was requested, if there were other elements at play. All of the public interaction and public hearing would still be required. This does not change that part of the process. As Mike was just able to articulate, this really is for those that are in the commercial corridor and do not request exceptions. Ideally, this helps to streamline that process. But if there are changes or modifications, in particular those that were maybe recommended to us as examples or were emailed or shared at that last meeting and conversation, all of those policies that would kick in are still in place. This is really just about streamlining this element of the process, not necessarily removing opportunities for public interaction and comment and thoughtfulness. So this has been a probably 10-month-long conversation. And part of, I think, what spurred it is this council and staff team really believes in the commercial corridor review process and believes that it has produced some really phenomenal projects in our commercial corridors that have been really essential. But we hear that it's an elongated process and it presents some challenges that perhaps were unintended. And so we had asked staff to bring some recommendations forward that would not remove public input, but would streamline the process. And this was an example of one of those actions that we've now considered multiple times and had a study session on. So for folks that maybe didn't catch those, this has been a very long conversation, and this is the third meeting now that we've considered this action. So I thank staff for hanging in there with us and answering those questions, and thank the members of the public that have reached out with questions and wanting clarification.
I think Councilmember Wendell, you brought up a good point that I forgot to mention is the process was the same whether you're asking for an exception or not. So we were encouraging applicants to ask for exceptions to our ordinance because they had to go through the process regardless. What we heard from feedback is if we don't have to go through the process, we will meet every one of your requirements because time is money, and we would just as soon build great projects for our community, but we want to shorten the time. So, but if you're going to make us go through this elongated process, we're going to ask for as many exceptions as we want because time and money, and so you're wasting our time. So we're going to try and cut costs somewhere. So we're going to ask for exceptions. So I think with this change, they're willing to meet our design requirements, and that's really what it is. It's design. It's not the use or the intensity. It's the design of the structure itself. And they're willing to meet those requirements to save time.
All right, thanks, Mike. Any other comments, questions on this item? Please call the roll.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran. Aye.
All right, move on to item 9F. Remove from the table Public hearing action on ordinance 24-035, an ordinance amending Chapter 94, Article 4, Division 2 pertaining to Section 94-163, Plan Development District. Mike Struck will also elaborate on this item.
Thank you, Mayor. From a technical question, Mr. Jones, do we need to have a vote to remove from the table before we introduce the topic? Or do you want me to?
Yes, we should.
All right, so then I entertain a motion to remove the item from the table.
So moved.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Specker.
Aye.
Tildenburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye. Entertain a motion to approve this item after, well, all right, Mike, go ahead and explain.
Okay. So technically,
Jumping
we
ahead of
already
you.
have a motion to approve. So let me introduce this item. This is an ordinance 24-035 is an ordinance amending a portion of our planned development district. With your previous action on the commercial corridor, we would recommend this change. Previously, through the commercial corridor design review overlay district, planned development districts were exempt from following that process. With your just previous change, they are now included in the commercial corridor. As such, with the planned development district, it's a multiple step process where there's an initial development plan that goes through the planning commission and the city council for approval, and then they have to come back with a final development plan that only goes to the planning commission. What we're proposing with this is through a planned development district, when they go through that initial development plan process and they get their initial development plan approved, then they follow the commercial corridor. If it meets all the requirements of the commercial corridor and is consistent with the initial development plan, it's administrative approval. If there's a variance along the way, then they have to go through that final development plan process of planning commission approval. So they would not be subjected to a final development plan if they're in the commercial corridor, but they would need to follow the commercial corridor standards. And they have the potential to be administrative approval. If they don't, then it's the same process, planning commission, city council, for any exceptions that they'd be asking for. With that, I'd stand for any questions you may have.
All right, entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item? Council, questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Tildenburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Okay, item 9G, public hearing and action on a commercial corridor design review overlay district site plan for Lot 2 in Block 1 of the Weiss addition. Mike Struck will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. The commercial corridor design review overlay district site plan for Lot 2, Block 1 of Weiss addition, more commonly known as the empty lot directly west of Whiskey Creek, that will be on the east side of Lefevre Drive as you turn into the Marketplace off of 6th Street. It's highlighted up there. The parcel is in yellow, but the boundary shows it red. This is a B4 zoning district. It's unique is that the proposal that they're submitting tonight shows two businesses on the one lot. And so they are asking for two exceptions from our commercial corridor standards. The first one being is when you have two businesses located on a lot, you have to treat it as if each business, each structure meets the minimum lot area. And so in the B4 district, the minimum lot area is 30,000 square feet. It equates that for two businesses, they need 60,000. The lot itself is 1,045 feet, 1,045 square feet shy, so 58,955 square feet approximately. So that's the first exception they're asking for. The second exception they're asking for is we have a 20% window glazing on the corridor facing facade. The one building is at 14%, the other building's at 15%, but they're also incorporating awnings above those windows. So the overall intent of trying to create kind of that aesthetic features on those front-facing facades facing the corridor, we feel is achieved through the windows and the addition of the awnings above those windows. Those are the only two exceptions that they're asking for from the Commercial Corridor Design Review standards. This does come to you with a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission, and staff supports the request. I'd stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mike. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public hearing on, or any public comment on this item? Council, any questions, comments on this item? Please call the roll.
Wendell?
Aye.
Avery?
Aye.
Doran?
Aye.
Hager?
Aye.
Niemeyer?
Aye.
Specker?
Aye.
Tilton Burn?
Aye.
All right. Item 9H, public hearing and action on a commercial corridor design review overlay on district site plan for Lot 2 in Block 1 of Lease Edition. Mike will also present this item.
With all due respect, Mr. Mayor,
That's
can we
our-
move on to,
Do we have a double up on that?
we move on to Resolution 25-055, resolution of intent to lease real property?
Do we have a double up on this, Bonnie? 9G and 9H?
That's what I'm looking at.
I think that's what it is. I didn't
Yes,
notice.
it looks like that's correct. We have a double up.
All right, so we're going to go to item 9I.
Okay, that'll work.
All right. Public hearing and action on Resolution 25-053, a resolution on annex to west half of the northwest quarter, excluding platted areas in Section 20, Township 110 North, Range 49 West, and excluding land north of U.S. Highway 14 in Brookings County, South Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. I'm
Members of
sorry.
the council, the action before you tonight on Resolution 25-053 is a resolution to annex some property on the east side of 34th Avenue. Some of you may look at this and think this looks a little bit familiar. As a couple of months ago, we had this same piece of property before you. There was a staff error. I will take the hit on that particular one. We missed one of the letters, so the legal description got messed up. We needed to go back and start the process over with the Planning Commission and the City Council with annexations. It's very important to get the legal description. And so we worked with the applicant. We'll take responsibility for the error. It was a typo on our part. But it does fall within our annexation priority area number 1, which means that services are readily available to serve this particular area. It is a priority for us to annex. It's immediately adjacent to the existing city limits. It does come to you as a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission, and the staff supports the annexation request. With that, I'd stand for any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mike. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Public hearing. Any public comment on this item? Council questions, comments? Please call the roll.
Avery?
Aye.
Doran?
Aye.
Hager?
Aye.
Niemeyer?
Aye.
Specker?
Aye.
Tilton Burn?
Aye.
Wendell?
Aye.
All right. Item 9J, public hearing and action on Resolution
Excuse me,
25.
Mayor. Mayor, excuse me. Just a point of order. I do think we missed item 9H. That would be Resolution 25-055, intent to lease at
Okay, so
RTI.
I'm a little confused
It looks
here.
like
This
your
is what
printed copy may have a typo.
All right. I don't have that on my paperwork, so we're going to go with that. Public hearing and action on Resolution 25-00055, a resolution of intent to lease real property, RTI. Sorry, Mike.
Nope,
My
thank
script
you.
doesn't say that.
Resolution 25-055 is a resolution of intent to lease real property at the Research and Technology Center. Cities are required by state law, if we want to enter into a lease that's greater than $500 annually or for a period of time, that we must go through a public hearing process. RTI has been a tenant at this particular facility for quite some time. We have designated this facility as we plan to take it out of service in 2026. We have notified them of such intent. They've asked us if we could extend the lease at the current facility on a month-to-month basis for approximately 1 year or so. They are currently exploring other leasing alternatives, as well as looking at building a new facility of their own on property that they own, kind of on the south side of the Telcamp Industrial Park, south of Falcon Plastics. With that, we propose the terms essentially are the same as they currently are. They lease a couple of different office spaces, which would be $10 per square foot for the office space, and then they also have unfinished garage space for a couple is being leased at $4 a square foot. On a monthly basis, it generates approximately $9,842 on revenue to the city. We did time this at such that it would kind of coincide when Ryan Companies could be vacating the property as well. So staff is comfortable with extending the lease with RTI on a month-to-month basis until no later than August 31st of 2026. That would still give us adequate time. We were looking at probably a removal of late fall of 2026 if we decide to proceed down that path. This does come to you. Staff recommends approval. I stand for any questions that you may have on this.
Thanks, Mike. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any public comment on this item? Council questions, comments? All right, please call the roll.
Doran.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
All right, so just so I'm clarifying, we're done with 9I, or do we need to finish 9I?
You are complete with 9I.
All right, so we're going to 9J then. Public hearing and action on Resolution 25-054, a resolution to amend the 2040 Comprehensive Plan's future land use map. Mike Struck will present this item also.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. The resolution before you tonight is action on a proposed amendment to our future land use map as part of our comprehensive plan. This request originated from Brookings Historic Preservation Commission. They were evaluating some of the uses, in particular along this 6th Street corridor, kind of from Main Avenue to Madera Avenue. If you're familiar with the historic districts, they border 6th Street. On the north side is the University Residential District. On the south side is the Central Residential Historic District. With our future land use map, it looked at the 6th Street corridor and some of the overarching policies that we looked at is understanding that change is going to occur at some point in time. What is the vision if and when change occurs? How do you want to see that change occur? And we've seen more of the change occur on the east portion of 6th Street. We haven't seen as much from that Main Avenue to Madera, with a few exceptions, but they've been outside of the historic districts, I believe, like the Brookings County title, going back to an earlier discussion tonight. That was our very first commercial corridor project, and if you remember, it was previously a Pizza Hut. They fell outside of the historic district, but as additional interest grows in the community, I mean, when we talk to businesses, there's always interest in being located on 6th Street. And so one of the things, we're looking at with the request tonight is what is the appropriate land use intensity along this corridor? And currently, most of the properties are zoned either R2 for a two-family dwelling or business B2 that would allow some commercial. The commercial is more on the western portion of the corridor, closer to 5th Avenue. And then there's just a little bit of commercial more towards Madera. Pretty much everything in between there, for the most part, is R2. When we started looking at kind of the densities that would support, so the future land use, when they looked at a lot of the areas, they noticed that the R2 zoning is very supportive of the medium density residential. Medium density residential typically looks at in the ballpark of 4 to 12 dwelling units per acre. The other area that you predominantly see in these historic districts is the RSP, which stands for the Residential Scale Preservation. The big difference between the RSP and the MDR is the RSP does allow the introduction of commercial into these spaces, where the MDR is more of a medium density residential, so it's more of a residential component. When they were going through the comp plan process and identifying some of these areas in this strategic area, they felt where appropriate to try and maintain some of that residential character in the densities that are existing at the current time. And that's why they chose the medium density residential in some of those areas, with potential in certain targeted areas that they could maybe accommodate a little bit higher density. In other areas, they felt it was more appropriate to try and maintain that residential scale preservation kind of along the 6th Street corridor, and that if change were to occur, it can certainly occur, but you look at the scale and form of how that change should occur. The uses may change, the structures may change, but they should really be compatible with the existing kind of residential scale that's been historically seen along 6th Street. So in the residential scale preservation, they typically would look at 1 to 2 story type structures, where the MDR could potentially go up to 3 stories if appropriate. The biggest question is really kind of what is the particular land use intensity that is envisioned along this particular corridor? Because if or when change were to occur, how would you like to see it from an intensity basis? There's been, I've received a lot of questions over the last several weeks in regards to this particular topic, and there's some questions out there that are lingering is they feel like this is a way to stop the removal of historic homes. That is not the case. There's a whole nother process, regardless of what the future land use map says. If somebody wants to remove a historic home, there's a separate process that they have to go through with an 11-1 review application that goes to the State Historic Preservation Office, and then they may or may not ask for comment from our local Brookings Historic Preservation Commission, and then they would make a determination, send it back to the State Historic Preservation Office. So there's a completely separate process for that. If, for whatever reason, or somehow approval was obtained to remove a house and they wanted to build something new, there's state administrative rules that they need to follow from architectural and height type standards for when located within a historic district. So those have been 2 of the more common questions that I've been receiving over the last several weeks. The future land use map is not going to stop the removal of historic structures. There's a whole other process through the 11-1 review that they would need to go through. What the future land use does say is, if change were to occur on that land use, what is the intensity that you think is appropriate if or when change occurs? There was very, very good discussion at the Planning Commission on this. There was 2 separate meetings. The first one in March, we kind of introduced the topic and then asked the Planning Commission how would they like to proceed forward. And then we brought it back in May because we lined up this public hearings and such, notified the appropriate landowners that their particular properties were being subjected to this change. Good discussion at the May Planning Commission meeting. This does come to you on a recommendation of 5-4 to not support changing the future land use map and to leave it as is. The development review team does not support the changing of the future land use map. And with that, I would stand for any questions you may have.
All right, thanks, Mike. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and second. I open the public hearing on this item. Is there any public comment on this item?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Are you going to time me?
Not sure. Are we timing tonight, Bonnie? All right, there we are.
All right, I'll try to. So my name is Matthew Weiss. I'm the Chair of Historic Preservation and a local architect. The BHPC, Historic Preservation Commission, is obligated by our own guiding document, the Brookings Historic Preservation Plan, to review the local codes and ordinances for inconsistencies between city documents and the goals of historic preservation. In so doing, we've identified that the 2040 Comprehensive Plan has a few specific lots of concern in what is drawn as the urban strategy area that we were just reviewing, specifically the minor section of road between these two established historic districts, the University to the north and then Central to the south. This is roughly between 6th Avenue and Maderi, or First Bank and Trust to Domino's for reference. In the 2040 Comp Plan, there are proposed a series of unrelated pocket developments of medium-density residential and then high-density residential proposed, which could disrupt the natural continuity of the district's residential scale and character. This is brought to light now due to several timely development pressures where we have lost historic properties to development and have the potential for further incursions, both in this specific target area and then to the area south of campus, which is also a concern to local residents. It is clearly BHPC's position to champion these concerns to the city's planning commission and the city council, and why we are here. We have several basic points for discussion regarding this topic. First, residential scale preservation. As written, the comp plan is in general accord already with the zoning district R2, which does allow decent flexibility of gentle density development, and which would better fit the parameters of the state's 11.1 historic review process. That is directly quoted on page 153 of the comprehensive plan itself. And if that were to be having any redevelopment advisable at all. We recognize that the housing density that exists in these specific parts is already matching into an MDR around that 7 dwelling units per area or per acre, but the concern is mostly in the scale and form of the structures that are possible going to MDR and high density residential. Secondly, affordable housing. This topic is continuously mentioned in the comp plan and other planning documents for Brookings, and we feel the strain. Historic housing stock remains one of the most affordable housing options for entry-level housing, and we should be doing whatever we can to maintain this option. 3, the state's 11.1 historic review process does not go away. I didn't even get through half of it.
I'm sorry.
I can answer questions you may have later.
All right, thank you. Please state your name and address.
Mayor, City Council. I am Janet Merriman. I am the Assistant Chair of the Historical Preservation Commission, and I now have the rest of Matt's notes. I am at 1803 15th Street South. Number 4 is we believe the comprehensive plan should not misguide developers and property owners along a path of strong historic regulatory resistance, potentially wasting them a lot of time, of money, and frustration. As Matt said, we've had a history of organizations buying property in the historic district with the intent to develop, and then once it comes to us, what do? We end up approving it because they already have the property. Resident awareness, we know there are several local residents here to speak in support of our goal. 6, maintaining visibility. If the loss of historic properties to higher density development were to happen along 6th Street, the historic districts would be less visible to citizens and visitors who travel this corridor. We should be increasing the visibility of the historic districts along this corridor to recognize the importance of preservation. An amendment to the comp plan still allows rezoning to whatever purpose in the future. But lastly, the comprehensive plan advises readers to consider it a living document that must be maintained, updated, and revisited to ensure it remains a helpful and relevant guide for the community. This is a direct quote from page 182 in the implementation section. Therefore, we feel that this request should be implemented in recognition of the request of the BHPC and other residents present. We believe there are others to speak with passion on this topic, but we look forward to your discussion and will answer questions that you may have. Thank you for your time towards this.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other comments, questions?
Good evening. My name is Sandra Calise, and I live at 811 6th Street. I just want to talk about there's a lot of grand ideas for future development at all commercial corridors that has made the historic houses on 6th Street vulnerable. City staff have advised homeowners that, as well as developers, that is up to landowners who sell for commercial, leading to the lack of investments of homes on 6th Street. DRT did not approve with this amendment proposal brought by HPC and said it would hinder the flexibility for future development. I do not believe that the Planning Commission had a full understanding when voting on their May 6th meeting on this amendment. Their vote was rushed and confusing. I live at 811 6th Street, and I'm investing a lot of money in my 1894 Victorian home. I love my house on 6th Street. I want my other neighbors to feel as confident as I do to invest in their historic homes and be supported by the city as the districts are already established. The City of Sioux Falls awards 4 interest-free loans up to $25,000 per year into historic homes. I would also ask for the City of Brookings to consider this in the future. A few more notable issues is that one neighbor told me that he completely disregarded the 11-1 review process and tore down a structure and just paid a small fine of around $150. This is not keeping those with non-historic preservation tactics accountable. Lack of consequences for tearing down historic structures, plus the city documents giving faulty information for future ideas of how we want the city to look are reflecting are a recipe for demolition. So I really love my historic home, and I want everybody else to love the historic districts as much as I do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any comments or questions from anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Rachel Reed. I reside at 907 6th Street. Sorry, I took a couple notes here. I wasn't planning on speaking.
Ma'am, could you get closer to the mic,
Sorry,
please?
I
Thank
wasn't
you.
planning on speaking. So I live on 6th Street. We bought a home there a couple years ago, and like Sandra, I really love living on 6th Street. I know everyone wouldn't, but we love living in the historic district, and we love the walkability that those two historic districts meeting really provides us, especially, to downtown, to other local shops and whatnot. Previously, we lived on the other side of Maderi in the Hillcrest neighborhood, kind of between Hillcrest and Maderi, and again, just one street in. And we really loved that neighborhood a lot too, but we noticed a stark difference once those homes were moved, once the high-rise buildings came and the parking lots and the removal of trees and the drive-throughs added. Which I understand that, buildings need to happen, but I don't think it needs to be in the historic district. We were very happy to find something in a historic district that had those protections, so we didn't end up in a neighborhood like that again. I think something that these maps don't quite illustrate is when you have something that big, it really creates somewhat of a development shadow. It doesn't just affect 6th Street. It really impacted that entire neighborhood where we lived. And, with this plan, the houses on 5th and 7th are some of the nicest historic homes in Brookings, and it would just really, really impact both districts, I believe. And I'd also point out that, where this HDR is, right across from that, the street is where I live, and is in RSP, which is the residential scale preservation. So it really kind of hinders those of us that are in those bubbles and decreases our property value, because then obviously a development isn't going to be built there, but we're going to be directly across the street from it. I would just ask that the city considers updating this map and accepting this so that it better reflects the historic districts.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Councilors. My name is Audra Fullerton. I live at 824 9th Street. I own my home at 9th and 9th. I'm also a newly appointed member of the BHPC, but have been following this topic for the past several months. You're hearing a lot of feedback, but I just would like to remind you that the amendment in front of you changes no rules, changes no enforcement, changes nothing except we are asking for the shared vision. I hear you, Mike, when you say it's simply the vision for the future, and that's exactly what we're asking you to share with us, is a vision that includes historic preservation, because as you can see on this map, historic preservation is not included at all. It's not noted on the future use map. It's not designated in any of the maps in the plan. And so it's very easy to simply not think of it, or to think of it at the end of a process. So we're not asking at this time, although in the future you can kind of hear that we may be asking for more later, who knows. But tonight, we're simply asking for historic preservation to be included in the vision for the future of these few districts that happen to fall in the middle of our commercial corridor, which is a very important piece of property for Brookings. And I understand the commercial corridor goes all the way east to west on 6th Street and north to south on Main Street. So we're talking about 3 or so blocks out of that can sort of get lost in the shuffle, and we're just asking to not get lost in the shuffle. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other comments from the gallery?
Mayor and City Council, my name is Gene Stegman. I reside at 1334 Westminster Drive in Brookings, South Dakota. I'm also the congregational chairman for Mount Calvary Lutheran Church that's located at 629 9th Avenue. As we've been working through the last couple years here, a ministry expansion project, we've been working with our neighbors as we are in the historic district. We've currently been at this location for roughly 75 years, and very happy to be there as we feel we serve our students at SDSU very well with our location. Our church feels that the current process of going through the 11-1 review, which falls under the State Historic Preservation Commission as well as the local commission, provides adequate protections for these houses in this area and ensures the proper processes are in place. Therefore, we would ask that the City Council to reject the proposal and keep the current land use in place. Thank you for allowing me to speak to this.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other comments?
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Weka, and I represent Vine Street Properties. Simply here to request that the property located at 706 6th Street retain its current zoning designation of medium-density residential. Thank you.
My name is Mark Kelsey. I live at 711 8th Avenue. The two historic districts were established in 1996 and 1999. It took 3 years for each of those districts to get established. When the city was charged by the state to establish a Brookings Historic Preservation Commission, I was part of that first group. We worked for 3 years on both those districts. We looked at other cities. We were charged with trying to establish areas in Brookings where we should create a heritage and restore a heritage, keep a heritage. And that area of 8th Street, 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, that was almost like a bond between town and gown. University was out there, city was here. Families built houses, people from the university, people from the city, and you want to split that 6th Street, take that away? I mean, we spent an awful lot of time, and there was a lot of effort taken to make sure that this didn't happen. Now, I heard some comments about, oh, all the things that are happening east of Madera. Well, of course, the 2020 plan, that was the deal. 16th Avenue was supposed to be maybe establish a dinky town, and, you know, there might be some changes along 6th Street, but Madera west to Main Street was hands off. That was the deal. That was the promise. And anybody that bought property after those districts were established knew that. So if, you know, you hear people saying, well, I own a house, but I want to develop it, you knew that when you bought it. That was the way it was supposed to be. And for us to sit here and think that we want to change the use of that area and the people in that area. I've been there, I've been in my house almost 50 years. And everybody around that area, 6th Street, they know what this district is. And anything you do down 6th Street to make it look like it is, you know, I mean, have you ever gone to other university towns and you go in and around and all those houses are gone? You know, I mean, there's something about coming into Brookings and seeing established homes as you come in instead of constant commercial like a Miracle Mile. That's ridiculous. So I urge you to keep the preservation as it is, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other comments?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, member of the councils. I'm Josh Westwick. I reside at 502 9th Avenue in the Central Historic District on the 9th Avenue block south of 6th Street. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and especially thankful for this timer, which I will keep my eye on. I'm here to urge you to strengthen protections for our city's historic districts and to make necessary modifications to the comprehensive development plan to reflect those protections. Our historic neighborhoods are more than a collection of old buildings. They are vibrant, character-rich neighborhoods that tell the story of who we are and how we got here. They give our city its unique identity, attract visitors, and serve as a source of pride for our residents, many who are in front of you tonight. These areas are not frozen in time, they are our homes. Unfortunately, the current development trajectory in Brookings and the comprehensive plan that guides it does not provide enough protections for these areas. I'm here tonight because the current plan is allowing for the disregard of the historic character that makes these neighborhoods so special. This puts not just individual buildings at risk, but the integrity of our entire neighborhoods. And while we've heard tonight that this plan, the current plan will not protect buildings, I continue to remain and worry greatly about the demolition of multiple historic homes, especially on my city block, and the impact of replacing those homes with higher density dwellings. Where I live, I don't want to look at large dwellings. I don't want to look at parking lots. I want to look at my neighbors' homes and the vibrant community that we've created. If these projects continue as planned and proposed, what's the point of continuing to invest in my historic property? When will this invasive encroachment on our historic districts in Brookings end? With that in mind, I urge the council to revise the comprehensive development plan to include stronger tools for preservation. The Historic Preservation Committee has provided you with an outstanding plan that protects our community, and I encourage you to take the action on that this evening. Public support for these modifications is strong. Residents, as you've heard tonight, are not opposed to growth. They're asking for thoughtful growth that honors the character and history of the city that they love. In closing, I ask all of you to lead with vision, like you have done for many years. Let's not wait until most of our irreplaceable heritage is gone. Let's build a future that respects the path, strengthens our community, and makes preservation a central part of how we grow Brookings. Remember, Brookings is someplace special. Let's keep it that way.
Good evening. My name is Calla Hogue, and I live at 711 8th Avenue in one of the historic districts. And I would just like to make a simple comment tonight, which I understand can be easily dismissed as kind of hearsay, but when I walk around my neighborhood or I speak with other neighbors, not everyone is going to be here tonight to speak how they feel about their historic home in a historic district. But I can tell you, every single person that I've asked, and again, I can understand maybe someone's doubt on this because they're not here to back me up, but I asked my neighbors and people that live in the neighborhood, would you like to lose those protections that you have enjoyed owning a home in a historic neighborhood? And their eyes kind of widen. I don't think they've ever really been threatened with that before. The thought of what could happen, houses being taken down, and the whole dynamic of the neighborhood changing. But I can tell you that not a single person has said, well, I don't care. They all care. Now, they might not all be here tonight to say that, or maybe are reluctant to speak in public, but I can tell you that the consensus or the sense that I get from my neighbors and from people who live near and around me is that they enjoy where they're at and they don't want those protections to change, nor sort of the sense of living in that historic district. So I speak for them as well as myself tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other comments from the public? All right, close public hearing. Comments, questions from council? Councilmember Tiltonburn.
Excuse me. First, I would just like to say that I really appreciate what was brought forward by the Historic Preservation Commission. Thanks to the members of that commission for the hard work that they've done to bring this forward. I think that the proposal that they've put in front of us tonight is something that's very reasonable and helps to protect the integrity and the character of the districts that are historic in nature along 6th Street. I think one of the great things about Brookings is that when you do drive through on 6th Street along that major corridor, we aren't just seeing the same thing over and over again. There's a great mixture there of new development, new business, but also some beautiful historic homes and a couple of districts that we've intentionally set aside to be historic preservation districts. And so I'm supportive of what was brought forward to us tonight. One clarification I do want to note is I think one of the comments asked that we not change the zoning. I just want to clarify this decision tonight will not change any zoning. It simply would amend some of the future land use planned in our comprehensive plan, correct?
Correct. This is not a zoning change whatsoever.
Great, thank you.
This is simply a future land use, so no zoning.
Councilmember Specker.
So to me, the future land use is sort of what your vision of the city is. I mean, it can be changed pretty easily, but I do support this application because I think it's nice having a preservation sort of mentality, connecting the two historical districts and leading into downtown. And from what they were saying about the history where you have the larger development east of Maderi, I also think with the business aspect, the Hogan Law Firm and Ripstein, that sort of was part of this historical preservation, right? I mean, that was designed to fit in with the neighborhood.
I don't recall exactly when they did their renovations, but I will say it's a lot nicer and more compatible currently than it was previously.
Right.
When it was neon and glass and metal.
Yeah.
Say that again, Mike, I couldn't hear you.
The current project that the Ripstein and Hogan Law Office did is much, much more compatible with the neighborhood than the previous store that was there. That had the neon and
the
a
video.
lot of glass. And
Used to be the Arctic Circle, right?
Mr. Movies, maybe?
Well, it was Mr. Movies before, but then it was the Arctic Circle prior to that. Way back when.
But I mean, I think you can still incorporate businesses into this land use map. I mean, it's not, because it isn't related to zoning. So you could have the business districts, but it's following that vision of keeping it consistent with historical preservation.
It comes back to the form and scale. as
Right.
changes to occur, making sure the form and scale is compatible with the residential neighborhood.
Right.
And that's regardless, I guess, if it's RSP for the residential scale preservation or the medium density residential. It all needs to, from a form and scale, be compatible.
Okay.
There are, through the zoning, there are different rules and regulations in place. So, from a density perspective, an apartment would be a conditional use in the R2. There's height limitations on structures in the R2. And so from a residential scale perspective, it's recommended that the structures maintain that 1 to 2 story. But as, properties may change over time, you can introduce commercial into them, but still trying to maintain that form and scale that is compatible with those residential neighborhoods adjacent to it.
And I guess my support of this is more, again, as a vision. And I think at the Planning Commission, I'm not sure who it was, I watched the minutes of that, but someone was saying that as a potential home buyer who's interested in historical homes, if they look at the land use map and see a consistency across this area in preservation, that they may be more willing. They felt that this change would promote more owner-occupied homes rather than rental properties. And I think there may be some truth to that. I would, as a possible homeowner, be more willing to buy if the city has that bigger vision. So that's just my opinion.
So what we're looking at here is kind of a strategy area that is solely along 6th Street and kind of looks at the block north or south of 6th Street. The rest of the historic districts are all medium density residential on the future land use plan. Because of the existing density that exists in those neighborhoods, because they were built with smaller lots than what the developers were doing in the kind of the 80s and 90s and all the way up to probably within the last couple of years, they were going with larger lots. And so the density on a per unit basis, outside of this map that you see here, when you go to the actual future land use, all of the historic districts, pretty much all of the central Brookings is really MDR. There's some areas where you start to get to the south or south central where you get into that lower density residential, but it's based upon looking at what the densities are existing. And if something were to occur and you had to rebuild, what sort of densities would you want to see in that neighborhood? I think I lost you.
So what is the density under residential scale preservation?
There isn't one. There isn't one. Residential scale preservation is simply showing that if change were to occur, it's simply at that residential scale and form that you would see
in the surrounding area.
In the surrounding areas. Yeah, they don't really designate a per unit density like they do with the medium and high density.
But if the surrounding area is medium density,
then you would probably go with medium density there as well.
okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I just have a question that isn't directly tied to my thoughts on this, but I was kind of curious if you could explain to members of the public why this particular item is on our agenda, even though it didn't pass the Planning Commission. Can anyone from the staff kind of unpack how we got here?
Yeah, so we allow due process. And so the Planning Commission only provides a recommendation. There needs to be final action taken. Depending on the issue or who's initiating the request, a lot of times if on the development side, if they don't feel like their request is going to be successful, they will withdraw it, because sometimes there are penalties, like in a rezone. If you are denied at the city council, you cannot bring that rezone back for any part of that property for a period of 1 year from the date of denial. So a lot of times they will withdraw it before it gets to the process. But we always allow applicants their due process because the planning commission only provides a recommendation and they don't have the final authority. So that's why it came to the city council, even though it was technically a 5-4 vote not to support it, but we allow due process to play out.
Thank you for explaining that. I think for some folks that sort of watch the pattern of items that come through our channels, it's helpful for them to understand if the Planning Commission perhaps doesn't approve an item, that it could still be on the City Council's agenda for consideration. I just wanted to provide a comment. I was on the council when we approved the comprehensive plan and had lots of conversation around the comprehensive plan. We've heard from lots of neighbors who either live along 6th Street, and perhaps in the last phase of this public discussion, we heard more from neighbors that were, say, a block off of 6th Street and east of Madera Avenue, which is kind of the topic of some of the conversations tonight, that there has been a spirit of compromise, I think, in those neighborhoods. And it's not because the folks living in those neighborhoods didn't also want us to take certain actions, but I think folks came to the understanding that we needed to create greater density in certain central neighborhoods in the community to achieve, in particular, workforce and affordable housing goals as articulated by the comprehensive plan. But at the time, I know the council had lots of discussion about, in particular, owner occupancy from Madera Avenue east to the interstate, and that there was very little at the time owner occupancy on that 6th Street corridor. But along 6th Street and west of Madera, so between Madera and Main Street, the area we're talking about tonight, at least my feeling as an individual member of the council was that we would perhaps think differently about creating greater density in that environment in the future. And so this request that came forward from the Historic Planning Commission to me represented a group that sort of looked at the comprehensive plan and said, in the spirit of what I think you're trying to accomplish, we would recommend these changes. And I'm supportive of the changes that were recommended. I understand the conversation that happened at the Planning Commission and some of the conversation that staff have had in honoring the comprehensive plan and what this actually would trigger. But I do think that, at least as I think about the contemplation I had when I supported the comprehensive plan, it was ensuring that there was still a process that would be in place if folks like the Historic Planning Commission had recommended modifications that could protect where those two neighborhoods connect, that perhaps is different west of Madera than it is east of Madera. Not because we all love that, but I think we've all sort of come to a compromise and understanding with some historic precedents in the community over multiple decades. So I'm supportive of the proposed amendment to the plan that came forward. And I do thank the commission and the Planning Commission and staff for going through this process.
Councilmember Hager.
So I don't have too much more to add from what my fellow council members have said. I too thought that these proposals that were brought forth by the BHPC were reasonable, in particular because it is providing a proper balance between growth and redevelopment while still trying to make sure that they're protecting their significant investments that have been made into their historic homes. And so, you know, looking into this more, I was just looking at how this really impacts style of redevelopment more so than anything relating to the use. So this isn't changing what the zoning is at this particular point in time. And I thought it was extremely helpful to be able to go back through the work of the Planning Commission, but also to talk to a variety of you, whether it was on text or on phone or on email, about these concerns that you had. But one thing I really wanted to point out that was part of my decision-making process was looking at these maps that we were provided, where we were able to see what is currently RSP versus medium-density residential. And I actually thought that a lot of the medium-density residential portions that were being requested to be switched to RSP actually seemed to make sense in terms of the adjacent properties. And so those medium density residential ones seemed a little bit more like outliers to me.
All right, Councilmember Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to make one other comment that I think maybe kind of bubbled up in the midst of this process, and it's not necessarily related to tonight's decision, but is maybe just a note that I would want us to have in our mind. I think the role that the development review team plays in these processes and lots of our processes is really important, and I think has actually improved our processes. But I think that if we could, in some of our public documentation, clarify maybe the departments that are represented on the DRT, I think that would be helpful for folks. When I look on the website, I think there's lots of good information about the DRT process. I think there's even an example of like, this is what a meeting agenda would look like if you come through the DRT. But I notice we use language like the DRT is represented by a cross-section of staff. And I get it, like maybe the same people won't be at the table every DRT meeting, so we don't want to put names. But I think maybe members of the public would benefit from knowing which departments or which folks would perhaps be at the table. Because if you don't work within municipal government consistently, it's perhaps hard to even know like, what lens will this be looked at through? Or if the DRT is giving this recommendation in so many of our public documents, perhaps defining a little more clearly which departments are there would be helpful.
So typically at a development review team meeting, there's representatives from the city manager's office, community development, public works, which also includes the engineering division, occasionally parks, recreation, forestry. And then we have staff from Brookings Municipal Utilities that represent the water, wastewater, electric, telecommunications. And am I missing?
Police and fire.
No, fire, we do include police. We don't. Drake's a wild card. We do, but fire is included, so. Yep.
I think it'd be helpful for folks that maybe only go through that process once or twice in their lives to maybe have a list that explains a bit better than just cross-section of city staff.
All right, Councilmember Duran or Avery, do you have any comments or questions?
Well, the only thing I would say is generally my experience is when we get a recommendation from the Planning Commission, it's not quite as close of a call as that, a 5-4 vote. I don't think I've ever remember having that. So there's obviously some consternation there, the people that weren't quite convinced or something.
I call that good, healthy discussion.
Good discussion.
Yeah, it was actually
Which
good
what we're
discussion.
having this evening. Councilman Duran, do you?
All of my thoughts have been covered that I've been writing. I would just say that I appreciate this process and this engagement. And this was a good reminder for me of how these subsections were created and the discussion around it, because I wasn't on council at the time. And so I appreciate that the committees and the volunteers as part of those committees have really done their due diligence throughout their duties on what they look at in their meetings, and it's nice to have that interaction with volunteers. So I appreciate you bringing these recommendations forward.
So about the only comment I would make is this is a comprehensive plan. It's been due to change. It was given to us as a council when the comprehensive study was done. We have changed it numerous times, and it will be changed throughout the next 40 years as to what we're hoping that this would be in 40 years. So what we do tonight may get changed next year. It is one of those things that the comprehensive plan was designed by a large group of people that looked at this with the idea of what happens to our city in the next 40 years. Will this change the dynamics that are between Madera and Maine? Most likely not, because everything is due to be able to be changed. There is a process, like Mike said, that if a house that has historic significance has to go through a process. With that being said, I think I'm ready to make a vote. Is everybody else ready? Please call the roll.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, item 9K, public hearing and action on resolution 25-056, a resolution to vacate a portion of 26th Street South, right away east of 22nd Avenue. Mike Struck will present this item also.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Resolution 25-056 is a resolution to vacate a portion of right-of-way on 26th Street South, just to east of 22nd Avenue. Best way to probably really describe this to you is it's a minimal maintenance gravel road on the south end of the Western Estates Mobile Home Park. But you're probably more familiar if you go directly across the street. That's kind of the bike trail that runs on the northern edge of the nature park. That stretch of right-of-way is unimproved, and as such, the city does not maintain it. But we have a particular section of our ordinance that says that we cannot issue a building permit until curb and gutter has been installed along all of the property line abutting a public right-of-way. In this particular case, the property owners do not wish to put in curb and gutter or to construct that segment of 26th Street to city standards, and have the 4 property owners have petitioned to vacate that. We are working with them, if approved, we are working with them to acquire an easement basically over the same property that we're vacating so that we can protect the existing utilities that are there, but also by state law, we would not be able to vacate until they have an access easement that would provide access to all of those lots along that way. So we're working with those property owners to comply with that. The approval tonight, if approved, would vacate the right-of-way, but it will not be recorded with the Brookings County Register of Deeds until those easement documents have been secured and signed, and then we'll do the recordings all at once. But this is really in an effort to help kind of streamline things. We've been holding up a building permit for a couple of months on this as we navigate through this process. With that, I would stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mike. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any public comment on this item? Council, questions, comments? Vacating this, we do not maintain, we do anything. Does the property go to the landowners then?
So when you vacate public right-of-way, it is depending on how it was originally dedicated. If it was an equal contribution from both properties, then it would be split down the center line with each getting the appropriate half. If you go back into the original records and it finds out that one landowner dedicated all of the right-of-way, then that would revert back to that original landowner.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions? Please call the roll.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Specker.
Aye.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran. Aye. Hager.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 10A, action on an amended large-scale residential development plan, Prairie Hills Landing. Mike Struck will present this item.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. The action before you tonight is to amend a large-scale residential development plan for the Prairie Hills Landing. With the LSRD, they can qualify for one if you have a minimum of 20-acre residential development. And when they originally looked at the LSRD concept, they looked at, generally, it's because you're master planning an area. In exchange, you might get some blanket type variances. And so one of the things I'll bring up is our standard side yard setback might be like 7 feet in a particular residential zone. But what they looked at in this particular neighborhood is 10 feet between structures. Or they'll have a blanket front yard setback. In this particular case, the amendment before you tonight is requesting a change to the rear yard setback. What they're asking for is 25 feet between structures. Typically, it's 25 feet from the property line to the structure. In the landing, it's a little bit unique is because all of the common area is owned by the homeowners association. And so you don't run into the same issues that you may run into in my neighborhood or your neighborhood where we can put up accessory structures in our rear yard, side yards and such. In this particular situation, the HOA controls the placement of everything in that common open green space. And so the main thing is just making sure there's appropriate distances between structures. From a fire perspective, 25 feet is more than adequate to be able to maneuver around those structures. I mean, we allow the buildings to be with 10 feet between their sides, so 25 feet is appropriate. This does come as a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission. Staff supports the request, and I have no other items scheduled on the agenda this evening.
Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any public comments on this item? Comments from council, questions? Please call the roll.
Specker.
Aye.
Tiltonburn.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Doran.
Aye.
Hager.
Aye.
Niemeyer.
Aye. All right, we move on. Progress report. Samantha Beckman, our Assistant to the City Manager, will present us the latest in the month.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. This is the May 2025 progress report. Switching it up this time. We had 182 people attending the second annual Fandom Fest at the library, which celebrates all things fandom, including board games, cosplay, trivia, and much more. And registration for all ages for the summer reading program are now open, and programs begin in June, so make sure to sign up on the library's website. The Dakota Bank Center hosted 19 event days in May, highlights including the Brookings High School graduation and Casa Fire and Ice Gala. And they will also be hosting Max Carnival this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, so make sure you grab your family or your friends and head on out there and have some fun this weekend. And before the central bank location at 6th Street and Main Avenue was demolished, the police department was able to hold a 5-hour training exercise. They also hosted 2 active threat trainings, not active shooter trainings, with Brookings Municipal Utility employees this month. And the police department staff was also present at the DEA drug take-back event at Walmart at the end of April, and they were able to collect 45 pounds of prescription medications. In the engineering division of the Public Works Department, ramp and signal improvements at Main Avenue and 12th Street South will begin in early June. Ditch maintenance is also taking place throughout the city. Notably is this one shown here near the Rainbow facility. And 6 Mile Creek maintenance north of Veterans Memorial Park should be completed here in early June, and the 2025 concrete maintenance project is about 80% complete, which is fantastic. The Solid Waste Division is continuing with the Solid Waste Master Plan. Groundwork will be starting here in the first week of June for the leachate force main project. And the landfill equipment storage building is just waiting for gutters to be installed and then should be completed there. And the first meeting was held on May 7th to discuss the initial designs for the residential drop-off area. And last but not least on this one, later this year, we'll be implementing the recommendations that a group of SDSU students gave us as their route optimization study came to a close at the end of this spring semester. In the streets division, streets crews are done with their crack sealing and they've moved on to asphalt patching here. In the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department, our director here, Kristen Zimmerman, has been asked to host a Sustainability and Action panel at the 2025 National Recreation and Park Association Conference, which just showcases all the work that the city is doing to promote sustainability. SDSU students also presented a pedestrian and bike connection rendering project that they did to staff. And then the city officially acquired the 5th Street Gym here recently, and open gyms will begin June 1st. I'll also add here that the pool is expected to open this Thursday as well. And there's lots that went on for Arbor Day activities to celebrate trees and community stewardship. And then last but not least here, Brookings was recently named the number 9 best college town in the Midwest and number 29 nationally. This recognition highlights the community's strong quality of life and appeal for students and residents. So great job to everybody who makes Brookings a great community here. Also on this slide, an estimated 100 people attended the Marketplace groundbreaking, which marks the $57 million investment into Brookings. Again, the Marketplace is home to future sites of Target and Aldi. And lastly, the city's 2026 budgeting process is underway. Departments have entered their budget requests, and the budget team, consisting of Ashley Wrench, our finance director, Tyler Loma, our assistant finance director, and myself, will be meeting with each department throughout the month of June before the initial budget is developed. And I'm also going to be giving the downtown fire update here, just to wrap up the slide here. The downtown community experienced a tragic fire on December 30th of 2024, starting at the Bros Fashion site at 318 Main Avenue. The fire impacted 314, 318, 320, and 322 Main Avenue. And since our last meeting where we talked about this on April 15th, the city's internal fire task force has met 3 times to focus on site remediation. A third meeting was held with the impacted building owners in late April to understand how they're doing, actions to date, next steps, and any shared city and downtown resources, as well as inquire about any other opportunities to be of assistance. So each of these building owners has been making progress towards remediation of their buildings over the last month, and the city will continue to help support them. I'm going to start with the northernmost property, 322 Main Avenue, the Exchange. A building permit has been issued to shore up the shared wall with 7 songbirds. A local contractor has been working on this site for a few weeks now and is expected to be completed soon. And a historic preservation review has been submitted for the exterior improvements there. On 320 Main Avenue, working our way south, 7 songbirds, the building has been declared a total loss. Property owners have submitted a demolition permit for historic preservation review, which has been approved. And the next steps there would be towards progressing to the demolition phase, which is based on the shoring of the shared wall with the Exchange. Moving south again, 318 Main Avenue, known as the Bros Fashion site. That building was also a total loss. Property owners have submitted a demolition permit for historic preservation review, which has also been approved. So next steps would be demolition and completing debris removal. And for safety reasons, the contractor who will be doing both the work at 318 Main and 320 Main will do that work simultaneously after the shoring of the Exchange has been completed. And moving south again there, 314 Main Avenue, that's multiple businesses in the building owned by Kevin Grunwald. That building has been determined to be structurally sound and is still ongoing restoration efforts there, with a target of being operational in summer of 2025. The next building owner meeting that we've got scheduled is actually for tomorrow afternoon, so we'll get some more updates from all of them then. And we'll be continuing to provide you guys with updates as more information progresses on each of these sites. Supplemental press releases, social media posts, and other communications may also be used as appropriate. And happy to stand for any questions on the progress report or the downtown fire.
Thank you, Samantha. Any questions, comments? Council? All right, thank you, Sam. All right, so we'll move on. The June 10th meeting, obviously, all the first readings we had tonight, we'll be seeing those again. Consent agenda, we've got temporary alcohol application from Sodexo for the football and volleyball events coming this fall. Ex officio reports from both BMU and the hospital board. Other than that, we don't have any first readings yet, and no contracts or change orders yet. Does council have any other items for future agenda? All right, we will be going into executive session. There will not be any business after we adjourn. And executive session pursuant to South Dakota Codified Law 1-25-2.3 for the purpose of consulting with legal counsel or reviewing communications from legal counsel about proposed or pending litigation or contractual matters. And SDCL 1-25-2.6 for the purpose of discussing marketing or pricing strategies by a board or commission of a business owned by the state or any of its political subdivisions, when public discussion may be harmful to the competitive position of the business. I entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are in executive session.